This heartless ingrate. Not even a visit home for the new year.
This heartless ingrate. Not even a visit home for the new year.
As I stumbled back home, the first thing I heard was John's usual reprimand.
Come on, she's never shown any gratitude since she was a child. It's not worth getting upset over her.
Mary, while making dumplings, rolled her eyes and chimed in.
Exactly, Dad. She never considered this place her home anyway. Don't let her ruin the new year for you.
Michael let out a cold laugh.
Maybe she's just upset with me and that's why she didn't want to come back this time.
Emily, always looking innocent and cheerful, gently tried to comfort our parents. With that, Emily forced a few crocodile tears from her reddened eyes.
All right, let's not talk about her anymore.
The moment his precious daughter started crying, John's anger dissipated, and he reverted to being the most doting father in the world. Mary put down her work, and Michael stopped playing his game. Everyone gathered around Emily, doing everything they could to make her smile again. I stood by the door, watching their harmonious scene. My heart felt like it was being pricked by needles, a pain far worse than the lingering agony I felt before. It had always been this way. Whenever Emily cried, no one in the family paid any attention to me. They each had their roles, busy preparing for the New Year's Eve dinner. And I never belonged to this family. Lily and I are twins. From the moment she was born, she was frail and often ill, while I remained in good health. The elders in the family said it was because I had taken her nutrients while we were in the womb, leading to her poor health. John, Mary, and Michael believed this explanation. In their eyes, my birth was an original sin. From as far back as I can remember, I was always the most superfluous member of the family. Michael excelled in his studies and was seen by John and Mary as a promising child. When I did well in school, they accused me of being overly competitive. When Lily fell ill, John and Mary would stay up all night by her side. When I got sick, they blamed me for causing trouble. Growing up, the clothes and shoes I wore were either Michael's hand-me-downs or things Lily didn't want. It wasn't until I got a job and earned my own money that I finally had my first new piece of clothing. The summer I turned 7, John and Mary took the three of us to an amusement park. Mary bought cotton candy and pretty helium balloons for Michael and Lily. John took Michael and Lily on the Ferris wheel and the duck boat ride. And I could only stand on the sidelines and watch.
Mom, I want to ride the Ferris wheel too.
Watching John take Michael and Lily away, I enviously and cautiously tugged at Mary's hand.
Don't be a bother. Do you know how expensive a ticket is?
She didn't look at me again, her eyes following John, Michael, and Lily as they walked away.
If it weren't for having to bring you along, I wouldn't have let him take the kids by himself. Who knows if he can take good care of Lily?
Saying this, she took a few steps forward, worried, and pulled her hand away from mine. But she moved too quickly, and I lost my balance and fell to the ground with a thud.
Mom.
Covered in dust, my knees aching, I held back tears and called out to her. But Mary seemed not to hear me, craning her neck to look ahead. Fortunately, there were people around, and a kind lady helped me up and reminded Mary.
Your child fell, didn't you see? What kind of parent are you?
After sending the lady away, Mary glared at me coldly for a moment before finally saying,
You're the most troublesome one, always causing problems even outside. I shouldn't have brought you out.
Those old memories, I thought I had long forgotten. The family of 4 sat in the living room, eating dumplings and watching a mildly amusing skit on TV.
Lily, Are you feeling okay? Did you eat enough?
Yes, Mom. I'm fine. The dumplings are delicious.
Mary was holding Lily, asking her all sorts of caring questions, while John was calling out to Michael.
Michael, any trouble at work lately?
No, Dad, everything's going smoothly.
Except for me. After a few initial scoldings, they completely ignored me. Of course, this wasn't the first time such a situation had occurred. In the second year of middle school, I was selected by the PE teacher for the school team because of my excellent long-distance running performance. I returned home excitedly to share the good news with my parents. But what greeted me was a merciless slap from Mary.
It's all your fault. If you hadn't taken Lily's nutrients, my daughter would have been healthy too. You little troublemaker, why did you have to come out of my womb?
Each word felt like a bone-scraping knife, pinning me to the spot, unable to move. John didn't hit me, he just grabbed my arm and dragged me all the way to my room, leaving me with a final warning before locking the door.
If anything happens to Lily, you'll see what I'll do to you.
His gaze was so cold that even in the scorching summer, I felt a chill to the bone. Michael stood behind John, looking at me as if I were not his sister, but an enemy who had harmed his sister. After a chaotic commotion, the house fell into a complete silence. I curled up in the corner of my bedroom, hugging my knees and crying silently. Lily stayed in the hospital for 3 days, and I was locked in my room for 3 days. No one cared about my well-being, nor did they care if my prolonged absence from school would upset my teachers. Fortunately, I had long been accustomed to being locked in my room. I managed to survive those 3 days with the food I had previously hidden. Later, I found out that Lily had just sneezed and coughed a couple of times that day. When we went to the hospital, even the doctor said it was nothing serious.
It's nothing serious. You don't need to be overly cautious.
Please, doctor, let Lily stay in the hospital for 3 days.
Yes, please, just to be safe.
They completely forgot about me, their daughter, who was locked in a room and ignored. Well, they never really treated me as their daughter anyway. Because of my 3-day absence, when I returned to school, my spot on the school team had already been taken by someone else. The gym teacher, who used to favor me, no longer looked at me kindly.
If you didn't want to join the team, you could have just said so. Disappearing like that, you're really hopeless.
With her tacit approval, no one wanted to team up with me in gym class anymore. I was isolated by the entire class. This isolation quickly spread from gym class to all my other classes. Eventually, it got to the point where people started putting bugs and small animals in my desk, and girls would lock me in the bathroom when I went in. They would doodle on my homework, throw my textbooks into the school's pond, and, with Michael's encouragement, repeatedly call me a jinx. Unable to bear the daily torment, I tearfully told John and Mary about it.
Are your classmates bullying you?
John and Mary dismissed my plea.
Why would others bully you and not anyone else? It takes 2 to tango. Why can't you reflect on yourself?
Your mom and I are already exhausted taking care of Lily. Don't bother us with these trivial matters anymore. Do you want us to die from stress?
Thinking about all this, I leaned against the door frame, my heart aching as if it had turned into a sponge soaked with water. John, having filled his stomach, suddenly remembered his daughter.
Call Jessica again and tell her if she doesn't come back tonight, she shouldn't bother coming back at all.
Mary, busy with the dishes, pretended not to hear. Michael, engrossed in his game, showed no interest. It was Lily who dialed the number and put it on speaker.
Sorry, the number you have dialed is currently unavailable. Please try again later. Sorry.
The cold, mechanical voice echoed through the living room repeatedly.
Bang! She dares to turn off her phone. She's grown up and thinks she can do whatever she wants. If she likes being outside so much, she should just stay out there and never come back.
Above, I watched as Lily, ever the manipulator, tried to calm John down.
Dad, don't be mad at Jessica. It's my fault. If I hadn't been unwell a few days ago, and you and Mom weren't busy taking care of me, you might have answered her call. She probably wouldn't be so upset and unwilling to come back. I'll call her again tomorrow and apologize. I'll make sure she comes back.
Lily's words, however, only fueled John's anger further.
Apologize to her? She doesn't deserve it. And what's wrong with an older sister giving in to her younger sibling? Haven't your mom and I always treated her well? It's true what they say, the better you treat a child, the more ungrateful they become.
Dad, don't be angry. Your health is important.
Lily hugged John's arm, resting her face affectionately on his shoulder, looking every bit the dutiful daughter. Seeing this, John's anger subsided considerably.
At least our Lily is sensible, unlike that ungrateful wretch. If I'd known she'd be so ungrateful, I should have listened to your grandmother and left her at the hospital when she was born. It would have saved us all this trouble.
Mary finished washing the dishes and sat down with a cold snort.
Enough, it's New Year's. Why bring up that ungrateful child? Isn't it bad luck?
Yes. No matter what I said or did, in their eyes, I was always just the unwanted burden. It was New Year's Day when a relative came to visit and inquired about Jessica.
She's too precious for us now, off to the big city to develop her career. She doesn't care about her mom and me, or this family anymore.
No one wanted to ruin the festive mood, so seeing the tension, the relative didn't dare to ask further.
Any news from Jessica?
After sending off the relatives at noon, John asked again. How I wished I could tell him, Dad, I'm right here.
Sister isn't answering her phone. I sent her messages, but she didn't reply and even blocked me on WeChat.
But in reality, apart from that call last night, she hadn't tried to contact me again. As for WeChat, it was she who blocked me first.
This is outrageous. Absolutely outrageous.
In my opinion, that girl is just clueless. If she doesn't want to come back, then forget it. I don't want to see her during the holidays anyway. Last time, I kindly introduced my buddy to her, and she didn't even acknowledge him, making me lose face.
Is that so?
Exactly. I was just being considerate, worried she might not find someone to marry in the future, so I introduced her to my buddy. He's quite decent, though a bit of a flirt, but his family is wealthy. I really don't understand what she was thinking.
If your friend is really that good, why not introduce him to our Lily?
No. My buddy has had girlfriends since middle school, sometimes even several at once. I wouldn't want Lily to marry him and then worry about all those other women. No matter how good his family is, it's not worth it.
You're right. Lily has a gentle nature. She shouldn't have to endure that.
Meeting Mary's affectionate gaze, Lily playfully stuck out her tongue. But they didn't know. Michael's so-called good buddy had drugged my drink the first time we met and took advantage of me, even recording indecent videos and photos. After that night, I had thought about telling Michael, but that person threatened me. If I dared to speak out, he would post my photos and videos online for everyone to see how disgraceful I was. He also told me that Michael worked at his dad's company. If I dared to say anything, he would have his dad fire Michael, making it impossible for our family to stay in this city. I had no choice but to endure. As Mary decisively ended the conversation, her face beamed with joy. She stood up and exchanged a knowing glance with John. They each pulled out 2 large red envelopes from their pockets, handing them to their children with a smile.
May our dear Lily and our beloved son achieve all their dreams and have everything go smoothly in the new year.
Thank you, Mom and Dad.
Michael and Lily cheered as they accepted the envelopes and rushed to give their parents a hug.
Mom, didn't you prepare an envelope for Jessica? Won't she be upset when she comes back?
Mary smiled lovingly at Lily, stroking her smooth hair and praising her.
Our Lily is so considerate. Even though she hasn't always been kind to you, you still think about your sister. It must be hard for you, my dear.
Lily gave a shy smile and clung to Mary's arm.
But she's my sister. How could there be any lasting grudge between sisters?
John playfully tapped Lily's nose, and Michael affectionately ruffled her hair. The family was truly harmonious and happy. But in reality, ever since I could remember, I had never received a red envelope from my parents, only their cold words.
It's just a red envelope. Do you have to fight with your brother and sister over it? You were so greedy as a child. What will you be like when you grow up?
Michael was an excellent student and the eldest son, so Mary never hesitated to shower him with love. As for Lily, her poor health meant that John had always treated her with the utmost care, cherishing her like a precious gem. That's why, as soon as she was born, she was given the name Lily.
And me? It wasn't until I was over 100 days old that they casually gave me the cold and indifferent name, Jessica.
Not just John and Mary, but Grandpa, Grandma, and all the relatives disliked me. I wasn't like Michael, the eldest son and grandson, nor was I as eloquent as he was. I wasn't like Lily, the pampered little princess who received all the love and attention. Everyone blamed me. They blamed me for taking away Lily's healthy life, for being born when I shouldn't have been. But when did I ever have a choice in any of this? There was a time when someone felt sorry for me and tried to persuade John and Mary to treat me better.
It was the spring festival when I was 10 years old. A neighbor lady came to visit our home with her 2-year-old daughter. To avoid neglecting me, she suggested that I take care of her precious daughter.
Jessica is the most sensible. Could you help Aunt take care of your little sister?
I was flattered and nervously took the little girl, who had just learned to walk, to play in the room I shared with Lily.
Lily followed us in, pushed the unsteady little girl, and gave me a malicious smirk.
Wah.
The little girl's forehead hit a small stool, and blood started flowing instantly as she cried her heart out.
The neighbor lady rushed into the bedroom, harshly pushed me away as I tried to help the little girl, and picked up her daughter with tears in her eyes. Don't cry, baby, don't cry.
Mary followed closely behind and slapped me across the face. Is this how you take care of your sister? How could you be so heartless?
Lily rushed over, tears in her eyes, pleading with Mary. Mom, don't be angry. Sister didn't mean to push her. Please don't hit her.
But her words only confirmed the crime that I had pushed the little girl.
No, it's not like that.
I wanted to explain, but I couldn't find the words. Mary slapped me 2 more times and locked me in the room.
Reflect on your actions. You won't come out until you admit your mistake.
Because of those slaps, I developed a ringing in my ears. After that day, the neighbor lady never showed me a kind face again and even told the other residents in the neighborhood about the incident. In no time, I became the most despised child in the entire neighborhood. On the second day of the Lunar New Year, according to family tradition, John and Mary would take the children to Grandma's house. I followed behind them, watching as they drove towards Grandma's place, the car perfectly filled with 4 people, leaving no space for me.
Once we get to Grandma's, if anyone asks about Jessica, you know what to say, right?
Don't worry. Everyone knows what Jessica was like since she was little. Who would ask about her?
Hearing this, John finally seemed to relax. Michael and Lily sat in the back seat. Seeing their parents' low spirits, they didn't dare to chime in. I floated next to Michael and saw that he had opened our chat window.
Jessica, you really are something. Not coming home during the new year. Do you know how upset you made Mom and Dad? They're getting older, and if you upset them too much, how could you live with yourself? If you're not going to be filial, at least don't drag me and Lily down with you. I'm warning you. Either call Mom and Dad to apologize right now or come back immediately. Don't make me say something harsh.
I watched his fingers fly across the screen, typing out these lines quickly, without any emotional reaction. How could he possibly know? I had already passed away. As for Lily, she was also staring at her phone screen, but the name displayed in her chat window was my boyfriend's.
David, my sister didn't come home for the new year, and it made Mom and Dad really upset. I know she never liked me, thinking I stole their love, but I tried to persuade them to care more about her. They wouldn't listen, and now she's being so stubborn. Not only did she not come home, but she didn't even call. David, don't you think my sister is being unreasonable?
Lily sent a long message, but even as the car pulled up to Grandma's house, she hadn't received a reply from David. Lily was furious, but with so many people around, she continued to play the role of the obedient and understanding daughter. Jessica stared at the message on her phone, her heart heavy with a mix of emotions.
Jessica, I really like David. Can you let me have him?
Jessica's thoughts were consumed by memories of past sacrifices for her sister. Since childhood, Lily had always gotten what she wanted, often at Jessica's expense.
Why does she always get everything?
Jessica recalled the painful experience of losing her university spot to Lily.
You and Lily look alike, so let her have this spot. You can always study for another year. Who knows? Maybe you'll get into an even better university next time.
It was the only time Jessica had heard her mother speak so gently.
But that spot was mine. I worked so hard for it.
I'm telling you, Jessica, you have to give up this spot whether you want to or not. Otherwise, you won't be going to any university.
After the threat, her mother locked her in her room and left with a stern face. Despite the confinement, Jessica refused to give in. Her parents decided to keep her locked up until the university term started, and Lily went to register with her ID.
Dad, Mom, am I not your daughter? Why do you keep hurting me over and over again?
Jessica ran out the door, wandering the streets under the scorching summer sun, feeling utterly desperate.
Maybe if I stay away long enough, they'll understand my pain.
But when she returned home after being gone all day, instead of an apology, she was met with a beating and locked up again. This time, they kept her confined for an entire month.
The day I was released, I completely lost hope in them.
Despite her despair, Jessica found a glimmer of hope in David, a kind soul she met in her repeat class.
Hey Jessica, need any help with the assignments?
David, you're the only person who makes me feel like I matter.
Jessica couldn't bear the thought of giving up David, the one source of light in her life.
Lily, I can't let you have him. David means too much to me.
Jessica's heart raced as she sent her reply, knowing she was finally standing up for herself. David had a blissful and harmonious family. It was something I could only dream of.
He was a carefree guy, even in the repeat class. He didn't take his studies seriously.
As his desk mate, I lived in constant fear every day, worried that the teacher's scolding of him would spill over to me. Seasons changed, and David and I had been desk mates for 5 whole months.
Jessica, it's New Year's Eve today. I'm treating everyone to dinner. Why don't you join us?
David's eyes sparkled like a sky full of stars.
When he looked at me, my heart couldn't help but race. I knew then that I had fallen for him. But at the same time, I understood that I wasn't worthy. I lowered my head and declined his invitation. My parents want me home early. You all have fun.
I quickly said this and, without daring to look at him, grabbed my bag and ran off. Later on, I can't quite remember how David and I became close. I only recall that one evening after school, when David walked me home, we were caught by Michael, who had just returned from work. As soon as Michael entered the house, he told John and Mary about it.
Are you dating early?
I shrank back and shook my head, not daring to make a sound.
We sent you to school so you could study hard and get into a good university. And what do? You start dating early? If we had known you would turn out like this, we wouldn't have spent the money. You're such a disappointment. One day, you'll be the end of us.
John yelled at me and kicked me hard, sending me to the floor. Lying on the ground, my tears fell onto the floorboards, quickly forming a small puddle. In that moment, I was filled with intense hatred. They were the ones who had taken away my chance to go to university, ruining my life. And now, they had the nerve to call me a disappointment.
Dad, I choked out. Have you forgotten? I already got into university.
As soon as I said this, the entire living room fell into a dead silence. David called Lily back.
Hello, David. It's so good to hear from you.
Lily, has Jessica come home? She told me she finally got some vacation days and was planning to visit her parents. How could she not be home and have her phone turned off?
David's voice echoed through the room, freezing Lily's smile.
What? Do you think we're lying to you? That girl hasn't come back. Who do you think you're intimidating here?
She bought her ticket long ago. I even helped her buy gifts for everyone in your family. Have you really tried to contact her?
John was at a loss for words, panic briefly flashing in his eyes. Someone accidentally knocked the phone out of John's hand, turning on the speakerphone.
Calling her ungrateful? I've been with Jessica for years, and she's never spoken ill of you. She works herself to the bone every day and saves money to buy you gifts. Now she's been missing for days, and you're not even worried something might have happened to her? What did Jessica do to deserve a family like you?
After venting his anger, David hung up. The piercing busy signal echoed in the crowded yet eerily silent living room.
What on earth is going on?
John suddenly turned to Lily.
I don't know, Dad. I really don't know.
John couldn't bring himself to scold her and instead repeatedly questioned Michael.
Have you contacted Jessica in the past few days? Where on earth has that girl gone?
I stood at Grandma's doorstep, tears rolling down my cheeks. Michael's playful expression vanished as he frantically tried to call me. But before he could find my number in his contacts, John's phone suddenly rang. Jessica is calling. Seeing the caller ID, John first let out a sigh of relief, but his face quickly turned red with anger.
You little rascal! Where have you been these past few days? You didn't even bother to let us know.
A serious voice interrupted from the other end of the line.
Hello, is this Jessica's father?
John swallowed back all the harsh words he was about to say.
Yes, who are you? Where's Jessica?
This is the A City Police Department. Your daughter Jessica was found deceased on New Year's Eve. We need you to come to the station to identify the body.
John choked on his words, unable to speak. His old and battered phone was so loud that even without putting it on speaker, everyone within 5 meters could hear the conversation clearly. The previously cheerful atmosphere at Grandma's house instantly turned chaotic. John didn't even have time to grab his coat. He stumbled out in his slippers, rushing towards the door.
Dad, it's cold outside. Put on your coat.
John stopped at her call, but even in this moment, he first showed concern for Lily.
It's freezing out there. Why are you coming out? Your brother and I can handle this.
Lily smiled faintly, her tense expression easing. Michael soon came out as well, helping John put on his shoes. Once they were finally dressed properly, John and Michael drove to the police station. The atmosphere in the police station was tense as John and Michael followed a young officer towards the morgue.
Are you Jessica's family?
The officer completed the registration and continued leading them down the cold, sterile corridor.
I've never seen family members as indifferent as you. When other families lose a child for even half a day, they come to the station urging us to find them. But you, the deceased, has been missing for 72 hours, and you didn't report it until now.
John didn't dare to retort and just nodded with an awkward smile, remaining silent. The officer, familiar with the cold and warmth of human nature, showed no kindness to them.
We're just here to identify her.
They arrived at the morgue, and I followed behind them, slowly drifting towards my body.
Here we are.
The officer stepped forward, pulled out the freezer drawer, and unzipped the body bag, revealing my lifeless face.
Whoa!
Michael shouted, taking a few steps back, patting his chest to calm himself.
Jessica.
John's lips trembled, but he couldn't manage to say my name.
According to the forensic examination, the deceased suffered a lot before passing. The perpetrator was extremely audacious, discarding the unclothed body in a trash bin in a city alley, where it was accidentally discovered by a sanitation worker.
This is horrible.
All the deceased's belongings, except for the phone which was damaged from impact, are intact. The family can take them all.
John neither responded nor moved, just kept staring at my face. I struggled with all my might, but it was all in vain. Even now, I can recall the excruciating pain when the knife cut through my flesh.
I was tied to a filthy table, watching my own blood flow. I struggled and pleaded for mercy.
But in the end, on New Year's Eve, I took my last breath. Narrator, tone, sad. My funeral was quite desolate. The attendees were limited to my parents and a few relatives from the family. They didn't inform any of my friends. Perhaps they thought the way I left was too disgraceful. I watched the relatives come and go in a hurry, none of them willing to linger for even a moment. I floated in the corner, observing everything. I saw my mother, who wasn't truly sad, only squeezing out a few tears when relatives asked.
Mother, Tone, Shy, thank you for coming. It means a lot.
I saw my father, acting as if nothing had happened, chatting with his siblings.
Father, Tone, cheerful. Yes, everything's fine. We must catch up soon.
I saw Michael, still sneaking in a game during my funeral.
Michael, tone, serious just one more level.
I saw Lily, who was about to cry but was quickly persuaded otherwise by a group of chattering elders surrounding her.
Lily, tone, shy eye. I can't believe she's gone.
Elder, tone. Hopeful there, child. She's in a better place now.
Sigh. These are my family members. Aunt glanced at my photo, speaking nonchalantly.
Aunt, tone, unfriendly. This has nothing to do with you all. It was her own bad luck. If she had left a few days earlier, would this have happened?
Even now, they habitually placed all the blame on me.
Aunt, tone, unfriendly. Exactly, sis, don't let this upset you. It's not worth it.
Narrator, tone, sad yes, what am I worth? Not worth it. It was all my own fault. Shut your mouths!
Avid burst into the room unexpectedly, and my initial surge of anger and bitterness dissolved instantly at the sight of him.
He looked haggard, with sunken eyes, bloodshot veins, and a chin covered in stubble. I had never seen him like this before. He used to be so cheerful and full of energy. David?
David? She walked towards him with delight, unable to resist trying to get close to him even at my memorial.
She quickly stepped forward and grabbed David's hand.
David, did you come here just to see me?
David looked at her with disgust and forcefully shook off her hand. Lily lost her balance and fell to the ground.
David. She looked like she was about to cry, seemingly not expecting David to be so heartless.
Who are you, young man? Attending someone else's memorial, cursing and pushing people around. Do you have any respect for the law?
Aunt helped Lily up, feeling sorry for her. Other relatives rushed over, all talking at once, criticizing David. I stood outside the crowd, anxiously pacing, afraid they might lay hands on David. But David wasn't intimidated at all. He stood there with the presence of 1,000 soldiers.
Who am I? Let me tell you, I am Jessica's boyfriend, her fiancé.
John and Mary exchanged glances for a moment, then together they pushed through the crowd and approached David.
Are you the one who had a relationship with Jessica back then?
Yes, if it weren't for you taking Jessica's college spot and giving it to Lily, I wouldn't have had the chance to meet Jessica. So, in a way, I should thank you both.
None of the relatives knew about this. John and Mary's explanation to the outside world was that despite Lily's poor health, she worked hard and got into a good university. As for me, no matter how healthy I was still considered useless and they had to spend money for me to repeat my studies.
David. You misunderstood. Back then, it was because my sister sympathized with my poor health and didn't want me to struggle with studying, so she gave me the spot. You have to believe me, our parents have always treated us equally.
David looked at Lily, his gaze as sharp as a knife.
Lily, you really know how to lie with your eyes wide open. Everyone knows the truth, and you're just trying to fool me here?
He then glanced at John and Mary, who were glaring at him because of his attitude towards Lily, and laughed mockingly.
Well, with parents who can't tell right from wrong, it's no wonder you're like this.
Although I had known for a long time that David had a sharp tongue, he was always gentle and courteous around me. I had never seen him like this. I have to admit, even when he's being so harsh, I still love him deeply.
Stop talking nonsense! If it weren't for Jessica, my sister wouldn't have been weak since childhood. So what if our parents are a bit biased? Which parents aren't? Who are you to talk nonsense here?
David continued to smile, but his bloodshot eyes gradually filled with a chilling coldness.
Michael, Do you only have one sister? Isn't Jessica your sister too? You claimed to be doing it for her good, but you introduced her to a scoundrel. You're a scoundrel too.
Overcome with anger, David punched Michael hard in the face. Caught off guard, Michael stumbled and fell to the ground.
Hey! How can you hit someone?
Mary immediately panicked and pushed David aside to help Michael. David stood his ground, his eyes like those of a fierce wolf, scanning John, Mary, Michael, and Sarah one by one.
You all know how you've treated Jessica over the years. I'm telling you now, you all share the blame for her passing.
With that, he ignored everyone, rushed forward to grab my photo in ashes, kicked away those who tried to stop him, and left the memorial hall. I wanted to follow him, but no matter what I did, I couldn't move more than 5 meters away from my parents. Helpless, I had to stay in the memorial hall. Narrator, tone, relieved. The air was thick with sorrow as the mourners gathered in the hall. Suddenly, a relative's voice shattered the silence.
Relative, tone, serious, what is this?
John slowly turned his head. Upon seeing what the relative was holding, his confusion turned into a painful memory. It was the only gift he had ever given me in his life, a cheap diary, a meager compensation after Lily took my university spot. John walked over in a few steps and snatched the diary from the relative's hand, eagerly flipping to the first page.
John, tone, serious, am I not worthy of being John and Mary's child?
This question haunted me during the month I was confined at home. John continued to flip through and saw more of my entries. Entry after entry revealed my innermost thoughts and pain.
Diary, tone sad. Today I met a new friend, the first person to care about me. His name is David. He is my light. Diaries, tone sad. The repeat class is charging fees now. I don't dare ask mom and dad for money, afraid they'll call me a jinx again and resent me for spending their money. I'm clearly not a jinx. Diary, tone sad. Emily said she likes David and wants me to help her get close to him. I refused her. This was the first time in my life I ever said no to my sister. Diary, tone sad. Mom and dad found out. They called me ungrateful and heartless. Mary even said she regretted giving birth to me and gave me an ultimatum. If I didn't give David to Emily, they would disown me. But have they ever really treated me as their daughter?
John's face hardened as he continued to read.
Diary, tone sad. For the sake of the light, I defied mom and dad for the first time. John beat me and kicked me out of the house. He hit me so hard that I was bruised all over. Fortunately, I was already used to it. Diary, tone sad. Michael said he would introduce me to a boyfriend. He said I wasn't good enough for David and that David would eventually fall for Emily. To save me from losing face, he urged me to break up with David first. Diary, tone sad. Michael said that man was his good friend. But why did his friend assault me?
John's hands trembled as he closed the diary, his heart heavy with regret and sorrow. John abruptly closed the diary.
Taking several deep breaths, his bloodshot eyes fixed unblinkingly on Michael.
Dad?
Michael felt a chill run down his spine under John's intense gaze and couldn't help but call out.
Closing his eyes briefly, taking a deep breath to suppress all his emotions, let's go home.
With that, he ignored the weeping Sarah and the rest of the relatives present, striding out of the mourning hall. I followed John, noticing that his hand holding the diary was trembling slightly. How I wished I could ask him, Dad, are you feeling sorry for me? But now, he could no longer hear my voice. No one could hear my voice anymore. We returned home, and after waiting for more than 10 minutes, Mary and the others finally arrived.
There are still so many relatives there. Why did you have to make a scene?
John stood silently on the balcony. In just those few minutes, he had smoked half a pack of cigarettes.
Michael.
His voice was hoarse as he called Michael's name, then slowly turned around to look at his son, who he had always considered exceptional.
The man you introduced to your sister, what kind of person is he really?
Michael had never seen John so angry before and was immediately frightened. But he instinctively retorted,
When did I ever introduce a boyfriend to Lily?
I'm talking about Jessica. Do you only have one sister?
John suddenly exploded, picking up the ashtray beside him and smashing it at Michael's feet. Michael was completely stunned, looking at Mary in panic, hoping she would plead for him.
Why are you getting so angry? Can't you see our son is scared?
Shut up!
John roared, cutting Mary off, still staring intently at Michael.
What kind of person did you introduce to your sister?
I told you before, that guy is just a bit of a flirt, but his family is really wealthy. If Jessica could get together with him and get married, her in-laws definitely wouldn't treat her badly. Dad, I really meant Will.
Although he appeared confident outside, at home, he was most afraid of John. Now that John was furious, he didn't dare to evade the issue any longer and quickly confessed.
A bit of a flirt, a bit of a flirt.
John suddenly let out a bitter laugh, rubbing his face as he sat down in defeat.
Michael, you really are a good son, a good brother to Jessica, introducing a predator to your own sister.
Michael panicked, his voice trembling.
What? Impossible. Even if my buddy likes to fool around, it's always consensual. How could?
John lost control and roared again.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
He flipped open the diary, turned to that page, and pressed down hard on those words filled with tears and pain.
Could Jessica be lying? You beast! You beast!
John was clearly furious, cursing Michael nonstop, making him unable to lift his head. Michael stood by the wall, shrinking like a quail. I didn't understand why John was suddenly so angry. Was he regretting it? Did he feel he had wronged me all these years after reading my diary? Seeing his rage, I should have felt comforted, but my heart remained unmoved. If it took my passing for him to regret, then I'd rather he never feel that way in his life. After all, passing away is truly too painful. Mary couldn't bear to see her precious son being scolded so harshly and retorted.
Don't you know what kind of person your son is? Michael is such a good kid. How could his friends be bad? Maybe Jessica saw someone with good prospects and tried to seduce him, then turned around and blamed him.
John suddenly lifted his head, looking at Mary in disbelief.
Jessica is our daughter.
Of course, I know she's our daughter. But she's never been easy to handle, wild and stubborn. Nothing she does would surprise me.
Exactly. Jessica has always been jealous that we favored Lily more. Maybe she made up everything in the diary, just so one day we would see it and you and Mom would feel guilty.
The room buzzed with tension as the family's argument escalated.
Are you saying Jessica did this on purpose so we would find her journal? That she intentionally put herself in danger? Michael!
John stood abruptly, grabbing an ornament and hurling it at Michael.
Do you even hear yourself?
Michael doubled over, clutching his stomach, his face paling.
I didn't mean it that way.
Lily sat quietly, watching John's rage, too scared to speak.
What are you doing, John? Have you lost your mind? Do you want to harm our son over that ill-fated girl?
John's face turned blue and then white before he slumped back onto the sofa, shaking his head with a bitter smile.
David was right. Jessica must have done something terrible in her past life to end up in this family.
Hearing John mention David, Lily's eyes lit up as she moved closer.
Dad, Jessica left us so suddenly. David couldn't accept it and said those things. Jessica was so good, how could she blame you and Mom? If anyone's to blame, it should be me. If it weren't for my poor health since childhood, you and Mom wouldn't have.
Lily played her old trick, putting on a pitiful act as she always did.
Lily, why do you call David that? And why were you pulling at him in the morning hall?
Lily's eyes reddened, her voice trembling.
I told Jessica I liked David and asked her to let me have him, but she was too selfish. No matter how much I begged, she wouldn't agree. Dad, if I hadn't gone to college, I should have been the one in the repeat class last year, and David should have been my boy for.
Slap! John slapped Lily, knocking her onto the sofa's backrest.
Weren't you the one who said studying was too exhausting, that your health couldn't handle it, and you wanted to experience college life? That's why your mom and I let you take Jessica's place in college. And now you say you should have been in the repeat class, and David should have been your boyfriend? Lily, do you have any shame?
Dad.
Lily clutched her face, looking at John in disbelief. She never imagined that one day, the father who cherished her like a treasure would lay a hand on her. Richard! The son was struck, the daughter was hit.
John, you monster! Mary couldn't hold it together anymore. She screamed at the top of her lungs and charged at John, ready to fight him to the death.
John impatiently waved his hand, causing Mary to stumble and hit her head on the coffee table, shattering the glass surface.
Ah! The scream was so piercing that it terrified everyone in the living room.
Michael, finally regaining his composure, rushed forward and carefully helped Mary up.
Mary, hold on. I'm here.
Mary's face was half covered in blood, and several shards of glass were embedded in her eyes.
Help! Help!
Michael fumbled to get his phone and dial 911, while Lily stood frozen in shock, unable to move.
What just happened?
Only John, initially startled, suddenly became calm. He stared blankly at the struggling Mary, his lips moving as if he were saying something. I moved closer and finally heard his words.
So, did it hurt this much back then?
No, not just this much. My pain was 1,000 times worse. Mary's eyesight couldn't be saved in the end. John sat dejectedly on the bench outside the operating room, leaning his head against the wall with his eyes closed, lost in thought. Michael and Lily huddled together, crying incessantly.
What will happen now?
I don't know, Michael. I don't know.
They cried for their father, who seemed like a different person all of a sudden. They cried for their mother, who had lost her sight overnight. Yet at my funeral, they couldn't even spare a single tear.
Have you cried enough?
In just a few hours, John's voice had become much hoarser. As soon as he spoke, Michael and Lily immediately fell silent. They didn't know what had happened to their father. They just huddled together, trembling, cautiously gauging his mood. John opened his weary eyes and looked at his two children, his eyes now even more bloodshot. I stood not far away, watching the family of 4 that had been so harmonious just yesterday. In just one day, they had reached the brink of collapse.
Lily, you stay at the hospital with your mom. Michael, you're coming with me to see that wretched friend of yours.
Without waiting for their agreement, John got up and walked in the opposite direction. Michael hesitated, glancing at Lily, but didn't dare to defy his unusually stern father. He could only follow, responding obediently.
Yes, Dad.
I saw him nearly stumble and fall in his haste. I followed John and Michael to the outskirts of a quiet neighborhood. Under John's stern command, Michael reluctantly dialed a number on his phone.
Dad, I can't.
John handed Michael a fruit knife, his expression unmoved. Michael's eyes widened in shock as he held the scorching knife, on the verge of tears.
As the older brother, you should protect your sister. Haven't you always looked out for Lily since you were young? Now it's time to protect another sister.
In that moment, everything became clear to me. I understood John's intentions. He wanted Michael, who had dragged me into this mess, to personally seek justice for me. But honestly, I had long stopped caring. A strong force pulled me back to the hospital, landing me beside Mary and Lily. Lily sat dejectedly by the bedside, while Mary had not yet woken up. An hour later, Mary finally woke up. As I had guessed, upon discovering her blindness, Mary went into a frenzy, throwing everything within reach.
Ah!
Her screams echoed throughout the entire ward. Lily was struck squarely by a collapsing four-stand. The bad news was, her eyes weren't blinded. The good news was, her face was completely disfigured. After a round of emergency treatment, Lily's life was saved, but she lost her ability to speak.
Jessica, remember this, you owe me, and you'll spend your whole life atoning for it.
Yes, I pushed her on purpose. Why? Because her meddling mother dared to think she could make our mom treat you well?
You may have known David before I did, but you were assaulted. Do you still think you deserve him?
Jessica, college life is even better than I imagined. Too bad. You can't experience it now.
Mom and Dad treat me so well. Actually, my body recovered a long time ago, but just to make you miserable, I'm willing to keep pretending.
Jessica, you should have been gone a long time ago. Why didn't you just disappear at birth?
Jessica!
The venomous words Lily once said to me echoed in my ears over and over again.
I think this might be karma.
My mother, who never saw me, lost her sight. Lily, who spoke so harshly to me, lost her voice. They got what they deserved. 2 hours later, John and Michael returned.
I feel like a lost soul, John. There's still traces of what happened on my hands.
As a spirit, I could no longer smell the metallic scent on him. Upon learning that Lily had been injured and rendered mute, John merely nodded slightly and asked no further questions.
We need to get them out of here.
That very day, John disregarded the hospital's objections and arranged for Mary and Lily to be discharged. He and Michael each took responsibility for one of them, bringing the still frantic mother and daughter back home. I followed them back to the house. I watched as John locked Mary and Lily in separate bedrooms. Days passed by. Unable to endure this life, Lily tried to escape one night by jumping out of the window. But with a broken leg and unable to speak, she was eventually brought back by the community security guard.
Sir, I found your daughter trying to leave. She seems hurt.
Thank you, officer. I'll take care of her from here.
Once the guard left, John's true menacing nature emerged.
Can't take it after just a week?
His voice was hoarse, filled with disdain.
When Jessica was locked up for a month, she came out and still managed to study well and get into college. Why can't you handle it?
He was no longer the father who once cherished Lily. He grabbed Lily by the hair and, amidst her silent screams and fierce struggles, dragged her back into the room and locked her in.
Reflect on your actions inside. Come out when you figured things out.
The same words I had heard countless times before had finally fallen upon Lily. The officer knocked on the door. Inside, the family of 4 appeared to be enjoying a harmonious meal.
Mary, Lily, you know the drill.
John had already used chains to bind Mary and Lily's feet to prevent any thoughts of escape. Hearing the commotion at the door, John and Michael each took one of them and locked Mary and Lily back in their rooms before opening the door.
Richard Smith, Michael Smith, is that correct?
Several officers walked in, frowning as they scrutinized John and Michael.
Dad, what do we do?
Yes, I am Richard Smith, and this is Michael, my son.
The officer at the front glanced at them a few more times, then nodded in confirmation.
Richard Smith, Michael Smith, you are both suspected of intentional harm. With both witnesses and evidence present, we are now placing you under arrest.
As the officer spoke, he snapped handcuffs onto their wrists. I thought John would argue, and Michael would resist, but from beginning to end, they didn't say a word, accepting their fate as the officers took them away. I stood by the window, watching the police car speed away. What is this? Redemption? Unfortunately, this belated redemption meant nothing to me anymore. Without John's care, Mary and Lily starved at home. It wasn't until a neighbor smelled their bodies that the police were called to handle the situation. A day later, the restraints on me suddenly vanished. I rushed out of the house eagerly, only to overhear the neighbors chatting in the community.
I heard the whole Smith family is gone. That man from the Smiths was too cruel, locking his wife and daughter at home and letting them starve. Really? He always seemed so decent. How could he do such a thing? He confessed everything inside. How could it be fake? And his son wasn't any better. He harmed his longtime friend a while ago. Oh my, what kind of people are they? I heard the father and son were sentenced to death. They were probably executed by now. TSK, 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 you never really know people.
The chatting neighbors gradually walked away. I stood still. A gust of wind passed through my soul, sweeping away the lingering resentment. I let out a relieved laugh. With that sudden gust of wind, I drifted out of the community. I finally found David. He had discovered a serene resting place for me and laid my ashes to rest there.
Jessica.
He touched the photo on my tombstone. I longed to reach out to him again, but every time, my hand would pass right through him. I could no longer touch him.
I miss you so much.
David lay down beside my tombstone, and I lay next to him, imagining I could still nestle in his embrace as I used to. We stayed like that, side by side, from dawn till dusk.
I'll never forget you, my love.
No matter how much I wanted to stay with him, the time for our parting finally came. Urged by the cemetery staff, he stood up and touched my photo once more.
Jessica, I'll come see you again tomorrow.
I watched his figure recede into the distance, realizing my spirit was gradually fading away.
David, be happy.
Before I completely vanished, I felt a sense of peace. Suddenly, David turned and looked back at me. For a moment, I even thought he saw me.
Jessica!
He suddenly ran towards me, as if in a frenzy. He saw me. I knew he wanted to hold me one last time, but he was just a moment too late. My spirit completely dissipated, turning into countless stars, returning to the path from which I came.
Jessica.
David knelt on the ground, crying out in anguish.